The galaxy had catalogued Mars long before humans ever whispered its name with hope. To the alien civilizations that mapped the stars, Mars was nothing more than a red mark in an endless ledger of failures. A world that had almost lived, almost bloomed, almost mattered, but didn't. Its thin atmosphere drifted like a ghost around a frozen core. Its surface was scarred by ancient storms that no longer raged, and valleys carved by rivers that had died millions of years before memory itself had a name. The aliens called it a dead world, not hostile, not dangerous, just finished. And in the vast, indifferent language of the galaxy, that was worse. High above the red planet, the Concorde observation ring drifted in silent orbit, a colossal structure of metal and light, older than most civilizations, its halls filled with beings who had outlived empires and watched stars be born and die. They had gathered for a reason. A small, fragile species from a blue world had made a request. Humans wanted Mars, not to study, not to harvest, but to live on it. The chamber murmured with quiet disbelief. "They cannot be serious," said a tall, crystalline being whose body refracted the starlight into soft rainbows across the chamber walls. "Mars has no magnetosphere strong enough to protect soft tissue life," replied another, a floating mass of shifting shadows and glowing eyes. "Radiation alone will shorten their lifespans dramatically." A Cathari elder, massive, stone-skinned, and ancient beyond measure, rested his heavy hands on the edge of the central platform. "They know this," he rumbled. "Then why do they insist?" a delegate asked. The Cathari elder's eyes narrowed slightly. "Because they are human." The human delegation stood at the center of the chamber. They were small compared to most of the beings around them, soft, unarmored, no natural weapons, no hardened shells, just fabric uniforms and tired, determined faces. At the front stood Commander Eliza Rowan. Her hair was tied back, her posture straight, her hands clasped behind her back. She could feel the weight of 1,000 alien eyes pressing against her skin. "State your intention," the Cathari elder said. Eliza lifted her chin. "We intend to establish a permanent human settlement on Mars." A low ripple of sound moved through the chamber. "You will fail," a delegate said bluntly. "Probably," Eliza replied. That earned a pause. She continued. "Mars doesn't want us. The sun doesn't care about us. The universe doesn't need us. But we've never waited for permission before." The Cathari elder studied her for a long moment. "And when your people begin to die?" he asked. Eliza didn't look away. "Then we'll build a world where they don't have to." Silence followed. Not agreement, not approval, but something close to curiosity. The Concorde allowed the attempt, not because they believed in success, but because they believed in watching. The first human ships arrived at Mars like sparks falling into a grave. From orbit, the planet looked endless and empty. Red dust stretched to the horizon in every direction, broken only by jagged rock formations and ancient impact craters that cast long, cold shadows. The landing craft touched down with a hiss of compressed air and settling dust. Inside, engineer Malik Torres pressed his helmeted forehead against the viewport. "That's it?" he muttered. "That's our new home?" Beside him, Dr. Hana Iqbal smiled faintly. "Every home starts as something unrecognizable." The ramp lowered. Mars greeted them with silence.
Not the peaceful kind, the kind that feels like the absence of breath. Gravity was lighter, but not kind. The cold bit through suits and steel alike. Radiation levels ticked steadily on their displays, a reminder that the sky above them was not a shield, it was a threat. The humans stepped onto the dust anyway. Their boots left the first new footprints Mars had seen in thousands of years. Above, far beyond the thin atmosphere, the Concorde watched. The first habitat domes rose like bubbles in a sea of rust. Thin, fragile structures held together by metal frames and human stubbornness. Solar arrays unfolded like mechanical flowers, drinking in the weak sunlight. Machines hummed, pushing warmth into places that nature had long abandoned. At night, the settlement glowed, a soft golden patch of light against a dark red world. Alien observers noted it in their reports. Light emission detected, insignificant. But they kept watching. The first storm came without warning. A wall of red dust rolled across the horizon, swallowing the sky. Winds screamed across the plains, battering the domes and solar towers with invisible fists. Inside, alarms blared. "Pressure drop in Dome 3, Malik shouted, fingers flying across a control panel. Hannah grabbed a tever and clipped herself to the wall. "Seal it manually," she called back. "Radiation levels are spiking outside." "I know." The humans moved anyway. Two of them suited up and stepped into the storm. The wind nearly tore them off their feet. Dust hammered against their visors, turning the world into a red blur. Every step forward felt like defying the planet itself. Above, in the observation ring, a delegate leaned forward. "They will retreat," they said. "This world does not negotiate." Below, the humans kept walking. They reached the damaged dome and worked with numb fingers, patching, sealing, reinforcing. Their oxygen levels dropped, their heart rates climbed. But the breach closed. When they finally staggered back inside, collapsing onto the floor, the dome still stood. Mars had tried to erase them, and failed. Weeks passed, then months. Crops grew under artificial light. Water was pulled from ice buried beneath the soil. Children's voices, recordings from Earth, played in common rooms, reminders of why they were there. The Concorde's reports changed tone. Settlement remains operational. Human mortality within expected parameters. Expansion observed. The Cathari elder read every update. "They are not surviving," a younger delegate said. "They are persisting. There is a difference." "Yes," the elder replied quietly, "and persistence is harder to kill." One night, Malek climbed a ridge outside the settlement. The sky above Mars was sharp and endless. Stars burned without atmosphere to soften them. The blue dot of Earth was barely visible, a memory more than a place. Hannah joined him, handing over a heated flask. "Cold?" she asked. "Always," he said, taking a sip. "You ever think we're crazy?" She looked back at the glowing domes below them, at the lights, the movement, the signs of life where there had been none. "All the time," she said, "but I also think someone had to be." Far above, the Concorde's observation ring drifted silently. An analyst broke the quiet. "They are building permanence, not outposts, not research stations, a city." The Cathari elder closed his eyes slowly. "A dead world," he murmured. Below, on the red dust of Mars, a human child took her first step inside a pressurized dome, and the planet, for the first time in ages, did not remain silent. Mars did not surrender easily. It did not rage like a storm world or burn like a star too close. It resisted in quieter ways. with colds that crept into bones and machines alike, with dust that slipped through seals and clogged systems, with silence that pressed down on the mind as much as the thin air pressed on the lungs. The aliens of the Concorde had expected a dramatic failure, a catastrophic collapse, a final transmission, a red dot on their charts returning to nothing. Instead, they watched something far more unsettling. The humans kept adapting. The first major failure came in the 3rd month. The primary water extractor, a towering machine that drilled deep into the frozen soil and melted ancient ice, went dark in the middle of the settlement's artificial night. Inside the command dome, screens flickered from green to red. "Flow rate is dropping," Malik said, already moving. "Pressure's gone in the lower shaft." Hana leaned over his shoulder. "If that freezes, we lose half our supply. Then we don't let it freeze." Outside, the temperature had fallen far below what the suits were designed for. The wind wasn't strong, but the cold was sharp and absolute, like the planet itself had decided to stop time. Malik and 2 others descended into the access tunnel. The walls were lined with frost. Their breath fogged their visors. "Radiation spike detected," one of them warned. "Log it and keep moving. Water first, worry later." They reached the lower shaft and found the problem. The drill head had jammed against a layer of rock harder than anything their scans had predicted. The machine strained, overheated, and shut itself down to avoid tearing itself apart. Mars hadn't attacked, it had simply refused to cooperate. Malik knelt in the narrow tunnel, tools spread around him. "We can't move this by machine," he said. "Then we move it by hand," Hana's voice came through the comm. "That's a ton of metal. Then we become strong." They braced themselves against the drill head. Muscles burned, suits creaked, the cold bit through layers of insulation. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, with a low groan of metal on stone, the drill shifted, just enough. The system restarted. Warmth returned to the pipes. Water began to flow again. When they climbed back into the dome, exhausted and shaking, the rest of the settlement was waiting. No cheers, just quiet, grateful nods. Above, the Concorde logged another entry. "Critical failure resolved manually." A junior observer hesitated before speaking. "Is that normal?" The Cathari elder did not answer right away. "No," he said finally, "but for them it seems to be." The first supply ship arrived late, 2 weeks late, long enough for the food reserves to dip into emergency levels, long enough for the children's recordings to stop playing in the common rooms, replaced by quiet planning sessions and whispered calculations. In the main dome, Eliza stood before the crew. "We can stretch this another 10 days, maybe 12 if we cut portions." "And if the ship doesn't come?" someone asked. Eliza met their eyes. "Then we learn how to grow more, faster." There was no panic in her voice, just certainty. They converted storage areas into makeshift gardens, reprogrammed light cycles, experimented with soil mixtures that were more rock than earth. Some plants died. Some didn't. When the supply ship finally broke through the thin Martian sky, its engines glowing like a second sun, the humans didn't celebrate the arrival. They celebrated what they had managed without it. On the Concorde, a debate began. "They are consuming resources at an unsustainable rate. This ends one way." "They have already altered that way," another replied. "They should not be able to do this." The Cathari elder watched a feed showing humans laughing in a cramped dome, passing around a small lopsided loaf of bread made from their first successful crop. "They should not," he agreed, "but they are." The first birth on Mars happened during a dust storm. The sky outside the dome was a wall of red. Winds howled against the structure, shaking it like a thing trying to break free from its restraints. Inside, Hannah knelt beside a young woman, her hands steady, her voice calm. "You're doing great," she said. "Just breathe. I know it's hard. Everything here is hard." The lights flickered. Somewhere an alarm chirped and then went silent. In orbit, the Concorde's observers leaned closer to their screens. Physiological stress levels are extreme. This environment is not suitable for reproduction. Below, a child cried for the first time on Mars. The sound was thin, small, but it filled the dome like a declaration. The storm outside continued to rage. Inside, the humans held the newborn close, shielding it with their bodies, their suits, their warmth. The Cathari elder closed his eyes. "They are not claiming a world," he murmured. "They are becoming part of it." Months turned into a year. The settlement grew. More domes, more lights, more life. The aliens had expected the humans to carve out a bubble and hide inside it. Instead, they reached outwards. They built pathways between structures, reinforced against storms. They mapped the terrain beyond their basin. They planted markers on distant ridges, little flags of metal and fabric that said in every language the galaxy knew, "We are here."
One day, Malik found something in the rocks. A pattern. Not natural, not quite a structure, just a hint of something that might, long ago, have been shaped by something that was not the wind. He reported it. The Concorde took notice. Evidence of possible ancient life, an analyst said. Humans are now exploring a world we abandoned. Why? A delegate asked. The Cathari elder watched the feed of Malik standing in the dust, turning the strange stone over in his hands. "Because," he said, "they do not see dead things. They see stories that haven't finished yet." The next storm was worse than any before. The wind speeds exceeded predictions. The pressure drops came faster. One of the outer domes collapsed. Humans ran into the storm again. They dragged survivors back through red darkness. They sealed breaches with their own bodies when the patches failed. They lost power in half the settlement and rerouted energy manually, one cable at a time. On the Concorde, a delegate whispered, "They are going to die." The Cathari elder leaned forward. "No," he said, "they are going to endure." When the storm finally passed, Mars was quiet again. The settlement stood, battered but unbroken. A new dome was already being assembled where the old one had fallen. The Concorde's report that cycle was short. Human presence stable. Expansion continues. A junior observer added a private note. They are not surviving Mars. They are changing what Mars means. That night, Eliza stood outside in her suit, looking up at the stars. Hannah joined her. "Think they're still watching?" Hannah asked. Eliza smiled faintly. "Oh, I know they are." "Good," Hannah said. "Maybe they'll learn something." Far above, the Cathari elder rested his heavy hands on the edge of the observation platform. "We already are," he said softly. Below, on a world the galaxy had called dead, a city of light continued to grow. The day the first alien ship descended toward Mars, the red planet finally learned what it meant to be seen. Not observed from a distant ring of metal and light, not studied through silent lenses, but visited. The sky above the settlement changed color. A shape broke through the thin clouds, vast and slow, like a moving mountain made of silver and shadow. Its hull reflected the pale sunlight in soft, shifting patterns, as if the ship itself were breathing. Inside the command dome, alarms did not sound. This time, no one needed them. Everyone had already stopped. Malik stood frozen, wrench still in his hand. Hama whispered, "That's not ours."
Eliza straightened. "No," she said quietly. "That's the galaxy." The alien vessel settled into the basin beyond the settlement, its landing stirring up a wave of red dust that rolled toward the domes like a silent tide. Then the ramp lowered, and the first non-human to ever stand on Mars stepped forward. They came in many forms, tall, slender beings with skin like polished stone, floating shapes surrounded by soft halos of light, broad, heavy creatures whose footsteps left deep impressions in the dust. The humans watched through reinforced windows and external cameras. No one spoke. For the Concorde, this was the moment they had waited for. The test had moved beyond endurance. Now it would become judgment. The Cathari elder led the delegation. His massive form moved slowly, deliberately, each step a quiet declaration of weight and age and authority. He stopped a short distance from the settlement's main airlock and waited. Eliza did not hesitate. She sealed her helmet, checked her suit, and stepped outside. The airlock hissed shut behind her. Mars stood between them, alien and human, ancient and young. Commander Eliza Rowan, Human Settlement Lead, welcome to Mars. The Cathari elder inclined his head slightly. Elder Threx of the Concorde, he replied, we have come to see what you have done with what we left behind. Eliza gestured to the glowing domes, the pathways, the distant solar towers turning slowly in the weak sunlight. You're looking at it, she said. The tour took hours. Humans guided alien delegates through narrow corridors and open domes. They showed them water systems built from scavenged parts, gardens growing in soil that had once been nothing but dust and stone. They introduced them to children who had never seen Earth. One small girl stared up at a floating alien whose body shimmered like heat in the air. "Are you from the sky?" she asked. "In a way," the being replied, its voice a soft echo. The girl smiled. "I'm from here." The alien said nothing after that. The Concorde observers took notes. Human infrastructure is inefficient. Resource use is unsustainable long-term. Emotional attachment to location appears irrational. Threx watched a group of humans repair a cracked pathway instead of rerouting around it. They could save time, a delegate said. Why do they insist on fixing what breaks? Threx answered without looking away. Because they do not measure value by efficiency. The formal evaluation came at dusk. The sky above Mars turned a deep, burning red, the sun sinking behind the distant ridges like a slow, glowing wound. Humans and alien leaders gathered in the open, between the settlement and the alien ship. Threx's voice carried easily across the dust. You have established presence on a world the galaxy deemed uninhabitable, he said. You have suffered losses. You have consumed vast resources. You have altered a planetary system for the survival of your species. Eliza stood tall. Yes, she said, we have. A murmur rippled through the alien ranks. Threx continued. The Concorde must decide whether this endeavor should be allowed to continue or whether Mars should be returned to its natural, lifeless state. The words hit harder than any storm. Inside the domes, humans stopped what they were doing. Children were pulled closer, hands tightened around tools and railings and each other. Eliza took a slow breath. You're talking about erasing us, she said. We are talking about balance, about whether one species' desire to endure overweighs the galaxy's right to remain unchanged. Eliza looked past him, at the alien ship, at the sky, at the stars beyond. Nothing stays unchanged, not worlds, not people, not even you. That night, the Concorde delegates withdrew to their ship. Their debate was long. Hearts over logic, one argued. They are driven by sentiment. They are driven by connection, which we abandoned long ago. Threx listened to every voice. Then he made a request. I want to see the place where they almost died. They took him to the collapsed dome. The structure had been rebuilt, but the original frame still stood nearby, twisted and scarred by the storm. Malik walked beside Threx, pointing out the damage. This is where the wind broke through. We lost power for a while, nearly lost 3 people. Why keep it? Threx asked. Why not remove this reminder of failure? Malik thought for a moment. Because it reminds us we didn't fail. We're still here. Threx placed one massive hand on the bent metal frame.
It was warm from the sun. For the first time in a very long while, he felt something he had not expected. Respect. The next day, the Concord made its decision. The delegates gathered once more before the settlement. Threx stepped forward. "We will not interfere," he announced. "Mars will remain in human care." A quiet, stunned silence followed. Threx raised a hand before Eliza could speak. "This is not an endorsement," he said. "It is an acknowledgement. You have done what the galaxy believed impossible. You have made a place for yourselves where none should exist." He paused. "And in doing so, you have reminded us of something we forgot." Eliza waited. "That survival is not the same as living," Threx said. The alien ships departed that evening. The sky returned to its empty, star-filled stillness. But something had changed. The Concord's reports began to spread. Stories of a small, fragile species that had taken a dead world and refused to let it stay dead. Other civilizations took notice. Some with curiosity, some with caution, some with something that looked very much like hope. That night, Malik and Hannah stood on the ridge again. "You think they'll come back?" Hannah asked. "Yeah, I think they will." "Why?" He looked down at the city of light below them, at the paths, the domes, the tiny figures moving inside. "Because we showed them something they didn't know they were missing." Far above, on the Concord's distant ring, Threx watched the red planet fade into a small, glowing dot. "A dead world," he murmured. "No, a beginning." The signal reached Mars before the storm did. It arrived as a whisper across the stars, carried on channels that hadn't been used for anything but routine observation for generations. A simple message. 3 words. The stars are failing. The Concord had never used language like that before. Stars didn't fail. They burned, they faded, they died, but they didn't fail. Eliza read the transmission twice, then a 3rd time, her heart slowing with every word. "What does that even mean?" Malik asked, standing behind her. Hannah was already pulling up data streams from the Concord's network. "It means," she said quietly, "something's wrong on a scale we don't understand yet." Across the galaxy, systems were dimming, not all at once, not dramatically, just enough that ancient instruments, older than most civilizations, began to register patterns that should not exist. Energy fluctuations, gravitational tremors, a slow, creeping imbalance spreading from system to system like a sickness moving through the bones of the universe. The Concord convened in emergency session for the first time in centuries. Species that had not spoken to each other since the fall of their first empires appeared in the same chamber. They argued, they calculated, they blamed, but they did not act, because what was happening did not fit into any model they trusted.
Threx stood in the center of the chamber, heavier now, slower than he had been on Mars. "Where did the first anomaly appear?" he asked. An analyst hesitated. "Near the outer systems," they said, "close to the human frontier." The chamber went quiet. The second message reached Mars hours later. "We require your assistance." Malik laughed once, sharp and disbelieving. "They've got to be kidding." Eliza didn't smile. "What do they want?" Hannah asked. Eliza scrolled through the attached data. "They don't know," she said. "They just know it's getting worse." Outside the dome, the City of Light continued its steady, quiet work. Children played in low-gravity corridors. Engineers patched solar arrays. Farmers checked the growth cycles of plants that had no right to thrive in Martian soil. Eliza looked at them, then back at the message. "Tell them we're listening," she said. The Concorde's ships arrived days later. Not one, not 10, hundreds. They filled the sky above Mars, turning the thin atmosphere into a web of moving light and shadow. The galaxy had come to the dead world. Threx stepped down the ramp again, his voice carrying across the basin. "We are facing a cascade failure in our energy networks," he said. "Systems that draw power from stellar fields are destabilizing. If it continues, entire regions will go dark." "You're telling us the galaxy is running out of power?" Malik muttered. Threx heard him. "In simple terms," the elder replied, "yes." Hannah studied the data streams. "These systems are ancient," she said. "Why haven't you updated them?" Threx's eyes dimmed slightly. "Because they worked," he said, "and we believed working was the same as lasting." The humans gathered in their command dome. Engineers, scientists, pilots, farmers, teachers, not because they were the best in the galaxy, but because they were the ones who had learned how to live when nothing else would help them. "We don't have the tech to fix this," Malik said. "No," Hannah agreed, "but we have something else." Eliza looked around the room. "We've been building power systems on Mars that don't rely on the things they do," she said. "Solar, thermal, mechanical. We had to, because we didn't have a choice." "Are you saying," Malik started. "I'm saying," Eliza interrupted, "we show them how to start over." The first joint project began on Mars. Alien engineers, beings of light, stone, and shadow, worked beside humans in pressurized domes built for creatures that should never have shared the same space. There were misunderstandings, arguments, moments when no one thought it would work. But humans were used to that. They had built a city on a world that didn't want them. This was just another version of the same problem. A prototype power array rose on the ridge overlooking the settlement. It was ugly, inefficient, a patchwork of human design and alien technology. But when they activated it, the lights across the city did not flicker. They grew brighter. The Concorde's instruments spiked. Energy stabilized. Threx stared at the readings. "You are not drawing from the stars," he said. "No. We're working with what's here. Heat, motion, light, small things added together." Threx turned to her. "Why?" he asked. "Why not seek a greater source?" Hannah smiled faintly. "Because we learned early on that waiting for something bigger to save you doesn't work." The galaxy followed Mars's example, slowly, reluctantly. They built smaller systems, local networks, power grids that didn't rely on ancient, fragile foundations. It wasn't elegant, but it was resilient. The cascade stopped. The stars kept burning. Threx returned to the ridge one last time before leaving Mars. Eliza stood beside him, looking out over the city. "You saved more than us," he said. Eliza shook her head. "No," she replied, "we just showed you how we survive." "And how is that?" Threx asked. Eliza gestured to the domes, the people, the lights in the red dust. "We don't look for perfect worlds, we make them piece by piece." Threx considered that for a long moment. "In all our centuries," he said, "we mastered the stars, but we forgot how to master ourselves." The Concord's final report on Mars was different from all the others. It did not list resource usage, or survival projections, or efficiency ratings. It contained only a single line: "Humanity does not conquer worlds, they teach them to live." Years later, ships from across the galaxy would pass through Mars, not as observers, not as judges, but as students. They came to walk the red dust, to see the bent frame of the first fallen dome, to hear the story of a child born in a storm, and they left with something no technology could give them: a reminder. On a world the galaxy had called dead, a small, stubborn species had built a home, and in doing so, they had given the stars something they had not had in a long time: hope. And for the first time, the galaxy understood what it truly meant to be human.
If this story moved you, subscribe for more human stories from the stars.